Mixing techniques are a dime a dozen, but what is crucial when creating a rough mix, and what are the first steps anyway? Using our Xmas Mix Contest song Blue Silent Night as an example, I will show you how to create a rough mix and a sensible approach from the starting point. So let's start off with an art DAW, in this case Cubase 14, facing 46 tracks, which I already have imported in here. The tracks have been named after their instruments or functions, or in that case, like regarding the drums, the microphone that has been used for recording, especially regarding the kick. U47 should be a term here, and the AAA is the famous RCA replica ribbon mic. First step will be dealing with the tracks, getting them into an order that definitely makes sense, and grouping them. This makes sense in terms of getting an overview as well as getting them colored to easy see what you're working on. Lucky for us, all the drum tracks start with the letter D, and so we can sort them out, pack them together and move them up in the first lines of our DAW track list. Logically, we are going to start with the kick. As we can see here, we're dealing with 3 recorded kick signals, which is an in and 2 out signals. So let's see. Because before we get to mixing, we should identify what the signals are like and what they sound like before we get into the real deal. This makes sense because before working on details on single tracks, you have to make sure that you have an overview and you make sure that there are no alternatives or like adds to a single track. Some of the tracks already contain groups, as you can see here with the guitars, because we have doubled guitars in this stereo file. Often enough, you have multiple tracks on one instrument. As stock kind of guitars, when you're dealing with amp signals, different microphones or DI track, you have several tracks. But this one is grouped and the double guitars are panned left and right in this one. So let's start with the kick. Kick in is a D6, which is the microphone that has been used. Okay. Disruptor. This is obviously a trigger track. Let's place it down there and see what else do we have. Kick out. Okay, this might be the famous ribbon mic because we have less high frequencies. All of the recordings should be high quality since HOFA Studios is reliable regarding that point. So let's get an overview over all these tracks. Okay, that sounds fair enough, so let's color the kicks. Let's start with the color red for the red line, the kick within the beat. We're facing a lot of room recordings as well. Behind means, of course, behind the set. Then we have wide room, AB, which means the miking technique here. Further on, we got Room AB and MB Stone, which is a recording technique I came up with for very small rooms that are treated. I don't know if it works in that context, but we will see. Or here. Down there, we got the overhead tracks, which we will place a little bit more up there. And then focus on the snare, because kick and snare are main elements. Let's color the snare first, and let us not focus too much on detail here because we want to keep the overview and focus on grouping now to get a rough mix. just a little bit of the bottom signal. Mixing a top of the snare and bottom of the snare, you have to check on if the phase was flipped in the recording or if you have to do it for the mix. This time this was taken care of, and then we're gonna check the level of kick and snare quickly. Let's get this one a bit more. Okay, we want to have an overview as quick as possible. We want to get the faders up. We want to check out what the ingredients are. We want to see how to set the priorities and what is the important elements. And when we're done with it, then we're going to go into detail and work on the tracks. Since we don't have any hi-hat tracks, we're going to take the toms next up. And this drum set, if I'm right, seems to be in the drummer's perspective, but at least panning can always be changed. We're assuming drummer's perspective here. Okay. Now we're taking a closer look on what the overheads sound like. Okay. That sounds very good. So let's add some of the room recordings. And let's not invest too much time into it because, well, we want to get quickly to the point here. Because we roughly phase an hour to do the job here. And then later on, work on some details. The toms get yellow and the overheads and room tracks are colored as well. In one color, light yellow. So, overheads. Faders up roughly. This recording has not much output. It's actually the mic behind the drum set. But we don't need much of that. Ambi room AB. And the stone. A mic technique you might have seen if you watched the tutorial from the recording in the HOFA studios. SM57 pointing towards a stone in the opposite of the drum set. Sounds very nice, and especially with a bit saturation or compression on it. A good tool for alternative or for indie rock music, actually. We got some FX tracks as well. We didn't consider them yet because like kick FX must be a boom effect, and we have crash effects. These are additional tracks. We consider them a bit later because like these crashes support the natural crashes on the drum set, and we come later to that one. Here goes something we skipped, so always make sure to keep the overview. These are additional snare tracks to support the snare recorded tracks. Let's place them out there and color them orange. But These ones come into play after we have the rough mix of the recorded drums, because they are really additional triggered drum signals, not recorded ones. I mean, you can treat it differently, but first of all, have a natural drum mix, and then if you need some more additional punch or characteristics, put in the triggers. I mean, one of those is enhancing the drums on the chorus. So this is kind of a creative tool here. And there goes another trigger track. So far, so good. Now the supporting one, FX crashes here. Okay. A little bit less. And drops on the kick. Huge bass wave here. These additional effect tracks get another color here and get treated separately. Now, since we have a rough overview of the drums right now, before we do anything else like putting compression or EQing or reverb on it, we're gonna pack these and route them into groups. So let's start here with the kick and get all the kicks in one group here. Since the kicks are all in mono, we are going to have a mono group, which is kick group. We're going to use the Q link in the mixer section to get them all together into the group. Quite the same is going to happen with the snare. We're going to put that into one group. Of course, we will treat the tracks separately, but we will do something like EQing, compression, or giving a haul to the snare group, meaning the whole snare. Step number 2. But this is a special case. As we can see, the snare is mono, but the additional snares are in stereo. Quickly check on it. Is it stereo? Very slight differences, but you can see, even if it used to be mono, now it's roomy and stereo. Definitely. Now we gotta make a quick decision here. We end up with two groups. So we have the mono recorded stereo tracks in one group and the additional tracks who have a little bit of room into a stereo group by themselves. This is quite rare because usually you have the snare in mono, and if you have a send effect, which is maybe a reverb, you go into a stereo bus. Yeah, but the played snare remains in mono, not the triggered ones. So that means mono, snare group, routing snare top and snare bottom. And here we go with our second group, which is stereo and means the triggered snares. So snare stereo. In there. Why not? This mix is quite complex and carries the handwriting of a producer, meaning senior engineer Jochen Sachse. Of course, you could continue and create another group track, probably with the overheads and the rest of the room signals, but we're gonna head for a large, big drum group for every drum signal now in the mix. That means that the biggest instruments with the largest amount of tracks is now sorted and grouped. And this is why we call it drums all. Means for us that we go and route everything into the group. First of all, the snare group, followed by the kick group, then the snare additionals, but of course all the single drum tracks here, meaning crash effects, kick effects, they all go into the drums all group. Usually you could think about a tom group, but since we have two toms and really not playing them too much, this doesn't pay off really. So we let them separated for tom 1 and tom 2. So now we go with our first entire instrument group, which is drums all. Here we go. Yeah, accent is a bit loud. All right. Yeah, we got a lot more effect tracks down there, but the next thing we're gonna address is the bass. We got two different basses or main basses here, and the first one is a played bass, bass finger. And here is a bass sequencer. Okay, this one we need to match a bit. Of course, we're going to have a bass group for these both too, but that is only for like the end of the chain control, because we have to deal with these separately. A played bass is never sounding like a bass sequencer or a synthesizer bass. So let's just focus on grouping them. Add another track. And the next color. Okay, let's level them. Switch on drums all. Route the basses into the group. Level it roughly. But now let's go on quickly because we do not want to lose the overview. What else do we have? We got a bass drop, which of course is an effect. But we're gonna focus on these effect tracks a little bit later. Let's stick to the basics first. So what's next up? Yeah, it's a rock song, everybody. Now we're gonna focus on the guitars. So where are the guitars? We got a feedback here. And we have an acoustic guitar. Two acoustic guitars, already stereo. And as already mentioned, we have two Gibson SGs, so like double guitars, left and right. And a beautiful Jackson, which is doubled as well, so here go our rhythm guitars. And these ones we're gonna drag a bit up to get a kind of logical order here. Yeah, and of course we want to treat these guitars separately, but since it is the main element to a rock song, I mean guitars, we have them routed into a group, which is now gonna be guitar group. Yeah, stereo. It's going to be rhythm guitars. Yes. Down here we have a guitar mellow. Yeah, this is an add-on to the rhythm guitars. Yeah, but we keep it out of the rhythm guitar business here. Yes, we notice the SG has the low energy in the upper bass frequencies and lower mids, and the Jackson is quite more open in the higher frequency or registers, and we have to work on those guitars later. So next step will be to level drums, bass, and rhythm guitars roughly. Always keep an eye of the sum of the different groups so we don't overload the master channel and get a peak. I inserted a limiter on the mastering channel earlier to make sure nothing goes wrong here. So as we add more and more tracks, just from time to time pull everything down and have an eye on keeping some headroom. Of course, you're starting out at 0 when you have your mixer section in, but from time to time you re-level. So let's get kick, bass, and guitars and level them down. So let's go on proceeding here. The colors of the guitars next. Yeah, I know the color is not that important, but we want to definitely keep the overview here. There goes a feedback track. Let's put everything that's named guitars a little bit more up. And then we have two further guitars that play in the verses. And we're going to take a closer look onto these. Okay. Very colorful. Oh, there goes another group. No, just kidding. These two we can definitely treat separately. I mean, regarding like EQing, panning, stuff like that. But afterwards, we want to make sure that all the guitars, meaning just lead guitars, rhythm guitars, all of them go into one big guitar group. So we are at the end ready to level all of the guitars, really. But we're going to do that when we considered all of the single guitars and we are ready to group them up. Nevertheless, these one as well get the color green because we don't want to lose the overview. Yeah, it belongs to the guitars. What does the feedback give us? Let's level that down. This is a typical track that if it ends up in the final mix, you will have to automize that one in terms of level because you're going to be swelling up and down when it's time to have a climax. I mean, it doesn't make any sense to have this up and present all the time throughout the whole song. So let's skip that for a moment. We're going to drag this one down to the effect tracks here and proceed organizing drums, bass, guitars, and afterwards vocals to have the song standing, like get what the song is. And of course, get aware of every element within the song. Is it important or not? We have an overload here. It's an effect, no matter synth or guitar. What else? It's a piano. Okay, a melody track. We get this a little bit more up in our order. And we have a Fender Rhodes here. add it to our current mix, and let's go on. Drums. Piano is okay, Rhodes too much. What's that? Here goes something that doesn't have any distortion but 6 strings on an acoustic guitar. So let's get that up a little bit. Recorded acoustically and doubled as well. This means a little bit more workload because since it is recorded with microphones, it's not that much ready to go because you have like work on resonances and EQing later on to add the acoustic guitars to the other ones. It's up to your taste how you would level that, but we leave it like this for the moment. Here we recognize that the bass is fading out quite too long, so we here have to make an edit later on. Yeah, roughly matches the chord but should be faded out nicely. Same with the guitars. When they leave the chorus and walk into the next part, they should be faded out definitely. They're too long. Yeah, it's up to you if you want to do it by edit here in the tracks or if you do it by automation in the leveling, meaning the mixer section. If it would be like a bunch of tracks here, you would definitely do more edits, but this one is quite clean and good organized tracks as well. Yeah, here goes the fat bass, and we're going to make our first creative decision here because since it does not go unisono with the plate bass, we're going to thin it up by filtering it and make a kind of pad out of it. There are always like musts and rules you have to follow to get like a basic mix, especially the basic instruments, but there are always tracks you can be creative on because, yeah. Yeah, like that one. We have vocoder and we had get feedback and the bass drop and stuff like that. But these are effects, and I think that's it for these tracks here. That means we're going to quickly color the key instruments. Then we're going to have our large guitar all group, and then we are done with grouping the main elements, meaning the main instruments, to have an overview and an order. Guitars all. Yeah, let's take a look at the group's rhythm gits into guitars all, as well as the single tracks that aren't grouped, and they go into gits all. We had the rhythm gits, we had the guitar mellow, and of course these in the verses, all of them into gits all. Even the acoustic guitars go into that large guitar all group because again, we want to have like 4 or 5 faders in the end for all the instrument groups to re-level. And if you say like, the mix is brilliant, but the guitars are a bit too loud, you can just touch the fader and have them all down by just a simple movement. So I'm going to show you again why. Guitar mellow was too loud. How about the verse guitars? So we now created like gradings and nuances, like stepping from the more dynamic and lower verse to the like big and powerful chorus. And that's why we have like a rough picture now. Now check on our overview and make a little inventory here. Concerning the vocals, we got BV, which means backing vocals. Then we have Colinda, which is the female singer, and Jochen, who is the male singer. Further on, we got LV, which is lead vocals. So we see that Jochen delivered single voices, while Colinda had main voices and backing vocals here. Okay, let's get a quick overview and an order here. Let's check on Colinda.
Again in silence.
So we got high and low voices within one track. That looks like we're gonna face some level automation and maybe even EQing here. My suspicion is that these backing vocals that are placed here in the chorus are actually doubles. So let's place them left and right.
Searching for the spark of light, and for sure man is abiding hopes.
That sounds like a chorus. Here in the back, that looks like, ad-libs. A lot of tracks here. Yeah, these are definitely ad-libs towards the big finale of the song. So let's first of all listen to Jochen. Yeah, these are definitely Jochen's lead vocals here. As the song continues, they go together with Colinda's. Same with the chorus. Scream again in silence, echo. Yeah, the backing vocals only serve the whiteness of the chorus. But we have two continuous lead vocals here, Colinda and Jochen, all of the chorus. So let's quickly restructure it to have these lead vocals next to each other, like one and the other one underneath. Since these are the main vocals, this is the best for keeping the overview. And it's totally up to you if you're going to pan the backing vocals hard left and right or just partially left and right, as long as you have like that wide, beautiful chorus here. So here go the main vocals, the backing vocals, and this all seems to be ad-libs. First of all, Colinda. And they get a new color here. And then we have the ad-libs from Jochen. So next up, we're gonna level them roughly to have an overview over all the vocals, have like set rough priorities here. Of course, we're gonna go in with a lot of detail works in terms of EQing, compression, and having effects on the vocals, but we want to see that we have them grouped and as well as organized to be sure that we have like main and backing vocals and ad-libs and so on.
Searching for the spark of
Okay, what's that?
hopes and dreams colliding.
Let's rehearse the backing vocals of Colinda very shortly. Okay.
Get me out of there. Get me out of there. Get me out of the cold.
Yeah, the high octaves should be lower in level compared to the low octaves here.
Get me out of the cold.
Very nice. And let's check on Jochen here.
Get me out of the.
This one is panned exactly center.
Get me out of the.
Yeah, that's where we leave it. Both of the others, we're gonna pan a little bit left and right here. All of those can be kind of like distributed all over the stereo field, so you get a bit of a choir and can focus on each of the tracks, and you have a nice distributed vocal sound here. Yeah, we're leveling roughly so you can identify every voice, but set priorities here. Considering a final mix, you can make the ad-libs be the main vocal and stick out, or keep the main chorus going on and the ad-libs in the back. It's up to you, but that's too early. We're talking about a rough mix here.
And for sure, man, it's about it, and hopes and dreams colliding now to get me out of the cold.
A little bit too much for all at once and in the beginning where we are now. So we have a slight overview here. So the first group here is of course backing vocals, and that one is in stereo. What is going in? The vocals from Kalinda. Now a question comes to our mind. Do we treat these ad-libs as single voices, or we later on group them together as a choir? So that is a shift of priorities here, and we have to make a decision on that. So we check on what's the name of the track is, and it's saying lead vocal. So let's treat them separately in the mix here. Because we want to take the information that the recording engineer gives us, and by the name of the tracks, you know what to do. So these three additional ones go into the backing vocal group as well. And regarding Jochen, we create another ad-lib group. Because if you keep them in these little ensembles, you can quickly prior shift those vocal groups all in all. Okay, this addresses these three tracks down here. So what do we have? Let's zoom out again and see what we did before and what we have grouped so far. Chorus part, drums a bit roomy. We can fix that. Not quite there. Yeah. Even if the tracks are recorded in good quality, they sound a bit raw. But no worries, so let's keep going. And now we're gonna check on the last FX tracks down there. And regarding the vocals, there is a vocoder track, which is partially synth and vocals. This one is getting a new color, and the next one will be pink. This track is harmonically enriching some of the vocal parts here. So, and the synthesis signal of the vocoder carries chords here. And obviously it's kind of automated because we have higher and lower levels. And it even has a gate effect.
First so soft, then much too strong when you realize it.
It sounds very colorful. Very good. Okay, and we set the last color for this one. All right. A bit too bright. Okay, this one. Then we're gonna roughly finish leveling the additional tracks down there, meaning the FX tracks, and then we have a rough leveling finished and work on some details. Okay, vocals add, backing vocals. No, vocals add, Jochen backing vocals. What we could do now is have a large vocal group, like a vocals all. Yeah, that definitely would make sense before we go to further details. Let's start. Means backing vocals, into vocals all, vocals at Jochen, into vocals all. And this is concerning the rest of the solo vocals as well. So Colinda's main vocal, into vocals all, Jochen's main vocal, and the backing tracks. So that's it. Let's see if we have it all. That did work. Yeah, the vocoder track is not added into the vocal group. I mean, it's kind of your decision. It's half synthesizer, half vocals. You can treat it separately or you can add it to the vocal tracks. It's up to you, since it's a hybrid.
So soft, the much too strong when you realize
Okay, drums.
it's too late. So we scream again inside and take on and fighting, searching for the spark of light.
Okay, let's move up some faders. Just roughly what's left. Yeah, vocoder, we just had that one. Bass drop. Yeah, we know what to expect of this. Okay, that's too much. That's enough. What's overloading? Yeah, roughly a sound carpet. Feedback is the same category. Then we're facing some risers. Of course, these are transition effects or little highlights when moving out of a part into the next part. Let's check it out. Yeah, transition entering the chorus. Yeah. Okay, but there is another one which is called low noise riser. Yeah, that one is significant. Once more. And there's another riser. Siren City. What's that? Okay, it's gonna be low in level. That should do it. Yeah, we already addressed this fat bass topic, so let's go on here. Now we recognize overload and feedback could be even lower in level. Yeah, and Jochen's vocals have to be a little bit louder, but later. Last one is the sweep noise. Oh! Definitely enough extract that should be automated regarding the level and not be as high in level as it is right now. Yeah, definitely used very rarely. So we checked on each track, identified it, colored it, and grouped them together. And so we have like a rough mix in level now. And the next step will be we go into detail, like work on the tracks and set priorities, so main characters here, starting with a kick. At least a little bit of compression would be nice on kick and snare as main elements in the beat. That'll be nice. And we need some EQing on the snare. Of course, you have several options. If you go into the real detail, you will have several plugins here, and you will start with the gate, for example, on the snare. And speaking of the kick, you should address some EQing before you go into compression. And before you make the last steps, you're gonna probably add some more reverb for the drums individually. But since we're still talking about a rough mix, that should give an overview that reveals the song and tells you what the steps towards a final mix could be. We're just checking on a few measures here. Kick. The kick is recorded well and sounds pretty much, finished, so to say. But of course, we're going to be brave and put a channel strip on it, because the channel strip gives us many opportunities in one. One of these would be EQing, of course, in terms of a channel strip and characteristics. And another one would be compression. And since it is a rough mix and we have an eye on the clock, we're going to use a preset for a kick in. So let's take a look. Oh, that's a bit too much. Too much high frequencies. Of course, it's a question of taste as well. So regarding the attack, where do you want to have the characteristic in the upper frequency bands? Lower, or up there? And how much compression do we put on the kick-in signal, like in relation to the other kick signals? That much working on details we should have, because you have options. You can choose a gate here, or in that case an expander, but let's be real, we want to have a real sounding and fat bass drum sound that works for our beat here. And fatten it a little bit in the low end. I mean, we get some kick out low end as well, but we want to have some definition here and some compression for a good sounding bass drum sound. But nevertheless, sooner or later, we're going to go and compress the whole kick group with a send effect, taking a bus and compress them all together. And additionally, EQ them on the kick group together. Regarding compression, we can do that on the insert or by send. But you can do it also individually on the single kick tracks. Consider there are recordings where you just have one kick, or maybe two. So it's up to you to shape the kick sound of your liking, because that's kind of individual out of the given signals. In this case, we're going to have an effect bus, and that will be in mono, and we call it kick comp. And we're going to take that bus and look for a nice compressor. It will be the IQ comp, and we take a preset now called punch and bite. So we send our kick signal into the compression bus now and blend the signal of the effect, meaning the compressor, in. So here's kick comp. Let's switch it on and add something. I recognize we could work on a little bit more of EQing now, but just let's check if the level of the compressed bass drum still suits the group. And it does. But still a bit roomy. Yeah, whatsoever. But do we like our kick group? Okay. Next up, let's work on the snare. There's a bit more to do here. Of course, snare top is our main signal here. You can EQ some of the ringing out to reduce it, or if you like it, leave it in. But usually, in between 200 and 500, you reduce some frequencies. Too much? Just a little. A bit for the punch. I tend to feature a little bit around 200 to give it a fat punch down there, but yeah, it's up to you. We stick to the topic rough mix. Slightly underneath 200. Not too much. So the entire snare gets some compression on the group, enhancing the attack. That can keep up with the bass drum. So we go mono here, snare, comp. Of course, we need to check if the snare group matches the kick group, but just in a few seconds, we first focus on the snare. Get on the snare comp. Let's quickly set up a preset. Let's try drum transients here. I think this will do. So here goes a snare group. We're dealing mainly with the attack of the snare for a bit more punch. That's nice. And this will do for a rough mix. But now reconsider the kicks and blend in the overheads. And of course the additionals. Particularly in this part, we have a heavily played crash or China cymbal, and it features some frequencies that really mud things up, so we should definitely later on reduce some resonances here, but that is something for the final mix. Let's check on the toms. All right, together with the crash effects. This works, but in this spot, they're very short, so either you add a reverb later on or it's meant to be like this just for an accent. Let's add kick FX. Of course, we could add an EQ to more shape the drums on the drum group, but, well, look on the clock says us, it's still a rough mix, so let's go on. Let's take a look on the bass if it works. The bass group should be limited at least, or compressed to have a stable bass in the mix. This makes sure that like higher or lower notes don't stick out that much, and you have a really stable and constant low end and fundament. So let's try a preset that I like very much. It's called Bass Set and Forget. Very practical. Yeah, threshold. Does a lot. We need to EQ the guitars, and the first step will be to low cut or high pass, if it hasn't already been done within the recording. Looks good. But let's reduce some other resonances here. Of course, you end up with a lot of noise regarding distorted guitars, but that's the heuristic that the guitarist chose. Nevertheless, you have to take care of some sibilance and stuff, so let's reduce a little bit of that noise. Of course, you can be creative. You, in the first step, set an EQ where you selectively reduce peaks and resonances, and later on for aesthetics add another EQ and give some aesthetics and like wide band frequencies again to open up. You definitely hear it. Yeah, this cleans up quite a little bit. Of course, we check this all together with a drum group as a whole and the bass group to see if it matches for our basic mix. Yeah, kick and snare could stick out a little bit more here. The important thing stays, you have to adjust over and over again. First, roughly level, group it, then start on the details, meaning EQing, compression, of course, have sense, then again adjust, set priorities there. And this counts double for the vocals, because usually a final mix takes its time, you should know, especially in such a complex song.
Searching for the spark of light, and for sure memories of biting hopes and dreams colliding melting.
And the last thing we're going to address is a little bit compression on the vocals, as well as some reverb. That will be a nice thing that we could do right now. The best thing would be to add a channel strip, and so we have a little bit EQing characteristics as well as some compression. But you can proceed the way you like. Of course, you have mostly a vocal chain that starts with a de-esser. And depending if you have edited the vocals, you add a gate, or maybe the gate before the de-esser. Then afterwards, you EQ the vocals and then you compress them. Some people do it vice versa, or you have an EQ before and after compression. So whatever you like. The first EQ would again reduce selective resonances, the second one would add aesthetics. But for that purpose you can as well use a channel strip, representative for the vocals we work on Kalinda.
It's too late.
So let's take a channel strip.
So we scream again in silence, echo defiance,
A bit mic gain.
searching for the spark of the light. And for sure, memories abiding, hopes and dreams colliding, melting in a silent.
Of course we face resonances again, but we leave that out for the moment. And representative for all the lead vocals we use Kalinda, and show what we can do in terms of effects. Of course, we can add many effects like stereo spread on the vocals and delays and stuff, but we choose to just show this with one thing, and that is reverb. Let's call it Vox Reverb. We choose a random plate that comes our way, because plates are mostly beautiful on vocals. And of course, 100% wet because it's a send effect. It's a effect bus. What is very important that you route the effect bus into the vocals all, because in the end, we want to re-level or adjust all the vocal groups, including all the effects, all of them. So, and that's what we're going to do with Kalinda.
Defiance, searching for the spark of the light, and for sure, memories abiding, hopes and dreams colliding, melting in a silent night, blue silent night.
But this is just the example with Kalinda. And a very important mixing advice in this spot should be, if you use the same reverb, so the same effect bus, for other vocals, for example the backing vocals later on, and you want to push them further in the back, you give them more send. And so they seem to be more in the back. This results in a nice depth grading when you do this and add more send right here. This is a quite simple trick here. So here goes our rough mix that reveals the song to us. Of course, there are several steps left, especially on the vocals. We just did Kalinda, we have more vocals, for example Jochen. But using a channel strip as well as the reverb gives us a vocal sound that works basically for this rough mix. In conclusion, a little preview onto the mix that I made out of this rough mix. I recolored the tracks, and you see I've sorted them, I've grouped them. And as you can see, some of the tracks are cut and muted, so edited. In case of bass and guitars, I didn't want them to fade out that long. They should smoothly out, coming out of the chorus into the verse again. In the case of the drums, I got kind of creative because I wanted to have kind of variation in the beat, which is in the original mix as well. So we go with the kick group and the snare group, which end up in the drum group and have an automated color situator. Of course, in the rest of the mix, we have a usual drum sound with all the drums. Without the color situator. But here you can see on the drum group, there goes another slight color saturator, another compressor which is responsible for a bit more punch, and then a channel strip to shape the characteristics even more, which is excellent with this one. And regarding the single groups like the kick groups and the snare groups and so on, they have several different compressors that are addressed via send. The kick has a compressor for the punch, one for the sustain, pretty much the same for the snare drum here. The toms have their compressor, and we have 2 compressors for the whole drum group. So step by step I shaped the drum sound towards the final result and added an additional reverb to the room signals. Underneath you can see that the vocals have 3 effect buses, and as mentioned, all this leads again into the vocals OR group. We've heard the drums. Of course, the vocals were grouped, the backing vocals, of course, and the lead vocals as well. So and these received their 3 effects as shown. The first was a stereo widener as teased, the second was reverb, and the third one was a delay. And of course, all together, including the effects, is leading back into the vocals OR group. So we end up being able to level all these groups, all the drums, all the guitars, all the vocals. But besides that basic mix that should sound linear and open and not too much exaggerated, I made some creative decisions. Just 2 examples. The first is a piano that was meant to add on to the guitars. Sounded beautiful, but too much for me, so I pitched it up and added a reverb to it. Basically transformed into a pad. Secondly, this fat bass, which I referred to earlier, that didn't have the same lines as the original bass, so it was too much for me. So I thought, let's take HOFA system. It inspires you to be creative, so let's add a flanger, a bit of Digi Destroy, a nice reverb, and in the last step add an IQ EQ to make sure you don't have any bass frequencies in it, so basically high pass, but as well as low pass to get rid of that noise in the high end. That worked for me. Although it's getting really crowded in the final, I decided to leave in every single track. That made it a little bit difficult to keep it transparent, but just follow the basic mixing rules and afterwards you can get creative to your liking. When all voices come together, this is where the fun begins. If you want to delve deeper into the topic of mixing, take a look at hofa-college.com, and thanks for watching.